In the enchanting village of Ilodi, where ancient Baobab trees whisper secrets to the wind, lives Zola, a young woman known for her beauty, intelligence, and quiet strength. When a prophecy declares that her destined husband is named Joe, her heart is torn between 5 extraordinary men, each with the same name but unique virtues. A hunter, a scholar, a farmer, a musician, and a merchant. Each Joe offers something different. Yet only Zola's heart can reveal who her true love is. Through tests of character, generosity, and joy, Zola discovers that love is more than a choice. It's a journey of the soul. Will she find her true Joe under the wisdom of the Baobab tree? Dive into this captivating African folktale of love, wisdom, and destiny. If you like it, subscribe, comment, and ring the bell.
When you meet him, your heart will know, but your journey to find him will not be simple. Weeks later, Zola attended the village harvest festival, a celebration of music, dance, and community. The air was filled with the scent of roasting maize, the laughter of children, and the steady beat of the drums. It was there she met 5 men, each introduced by the village elders, and each, to her bewilderment, named Joe. There was Joe the hunter, tall and strong, with eyes like midnight. Then there was Joe the scholar, his mind filled with knowledge of the stars and the secrets of the earth. Joe the farmer had hands that nurtured the soil, growing life from the ground. Joe the musician could make the world stop with his melodies. Lastly, Joe the merchant, whose stories of travel and trade were as rich as the goods he sold. Zola's heart fluttered with confusion. Each Joe had something special, something that called to her. How could she know which one was destined to be her husband? The prophet's words echoed in her mind. When you meet him, your heart will know. But how could her heart know when it was being pulled in 5 directions? She returned to Baba Ifa's hut the next morning, seeking clarity. But when she arrived, a hush fell over the village. Baba Ifa had passed away in his sleep the night before. The last thread of certainty in her search seemed to unravel. Now, Zola had to rely on her instincts to find the true Joe. Zola decided she needed to know each Joe better. She would spend time with each of them, learning their lives, their dreams, and their hearts. Her mother, wise and patient, approved of her plan. Listen closely, Zola, Mama Noni said. A man's heart is revealed not in his words, but in his actions. And so, Zola prepared herself for a journey of the heart. 5 paths lay ahead, and only one would lead her to true love. Joe the hunter was the first she visited. He took her to the forest, where the canopy of trees sheltered them from the sun. He moved with the grace of a panther, each step careful and measured. Zola watched as he tracked a gazelle, his focus unwavering. Hunting teaches patience, Joe said, his voice deep and calm. One wrong move and you lose everything. Zola admired his discipline, his respect for nature, and his silent strength. But she wondered if the patience of a hunter was the kind of patience that could nurture a marriage. Next was Joe the scholar. He invited Zola to an open hilltop under the vast night sky. There, the stars sparkled like a million diamonds scattered across velvet. Joe pointed out constellations, his face glowing with excitement. These stars tell stories older than time, he said. They remind us that we're part of something greater. Zola listened, enchanted by his mind and his passion for knowledge. But she wondered if his eyes, so often turned to the heavens, could also see the simple joys of life on earth. Joe the farmer welcomed Zola to his fields at dawn. The soil was rich, dark, and filled with promise. His hands, though rough, were gentle as they planted seeds. The land gives back what we give it, he said, wiping sweat from his brow. Care and hard work bring a good harvest. Zola admired his connection to the earth, his humility and his strength. But she wondered if his life, so deeply rooted in routine, could offer the adventure her heart sometimes craved. Joe the musician played his mbira beneath a large acacia tree. The sound flowed like a river, soothing and sweet. Music is a language of the soul, he told Zola, his eyes shining. It can heal, it can teach, it can love. His music touched something deep inside her, making her spirit dance. But she wondered if his heart, so entwined with melodies, could also find silence and stillness when needed. Finally, there was Joe the merchant. He took Zola to his market stall, filled with spices, fabrics, and trinkets from distant lands. "The world is full of wonders," he said, "and I want to see them all." His stories painted vibrant pictures of places she had never dreamed of. Zola's eyes sparkled at the thought of adventure, but she wondered if a heart always seeking new horizons could also find joy in staying still. Zola sat beneath the ancient Baobab tree, her mind swirling with thoughts. Each Joe was special in his own way, each one capable of being a good husband. But which one was her true Joe? Her mother's words returned to her. A man's heart is revealed in his actions. Zola realized that to find the true Joe, she had to look not just at what each man offered, but at what her heart truly needed. Zola decided to create a simple test for each of the Joes. She needed to see how they reacted to everyday challenges and moments of adversity. Her mother, Mama Noni, helped her design situations that would reveal their true natures. "Remember," Mama Noni said, "character is like a pot of water. When the heat rises, you see what's inside." The first test involved a sudden rainstorm. The village was known for its unpredictable weather, and one afternoon, when dark clouds gathered overhead, Zola asked each Joe to help her carry a basket of produce to the village center. She wanted to see who would persevere through the inconvenience. Joe the hunter took the basket from Zola without hesitation. As the rain started to fall, he pulled a large leaf from a nearby banana tree and held it over her head. He moved swiftly and confidently, his eyes scanning the path ahead for any danger. When they reached the center of the village, he set the basket down gently and nodded. "The rain is just another challenge to overcome," he said. His calm, collected demeanor impressed Zola, but she noted that he didn't smile or show any joy in the task. His focus was on efficiency and survival. Joe the scholar hesitated for a moment, glancing up at the sky. "Rain is nature's way of cleansing the earth," he mused. He picked up the basket, holding it carefully, and walked beside Zola, explaining the science behind rain clouds and precipitation. When they reached the center, he was drenched, but his face was lit with excitement from the conversation. Zola appreciated his knowledge, but she wondered if he could handle the burdens of life without intellectualizing every moment. Joe the farmer smiled when the rain began to fall. "Rain is a blessing," he said. He hoisted the basket onto his shoulder and walked with steady, strong steps. "Without rain, nothing grows." He laughed as the rain soaked them both, his joy infectious. Zola laughed with him, feeling a warmth in her heart. The farmer's connection to the elements and his ability to find joy in the rain touched her deeply. But she still wondered if his contentment in routine could match her own need for discovery. Joe the musician turned the rain into a melody. He took a small drum from his pouch, carrying the basket in one hand and beating a rhythm with the other. "The rain has its own song," he said, smiling. "Let's dance to it." Zola found herself swaying to the rhythm, the world around them transforming into a stage. His creativity and joy were enchanting, but she wondered if life's more serious challenges could be solved with music alone. Joe the merchant frowned when the rain began. "We'll ruin the produce," he said, pulling a cloth over the basket. He hurried forward, his eyes scanning for shelter. When they arrived at the center, he was frustrated. "Rain can ruin a day's work," he muttered. Zola understood his concern for practicality, but she felt the weight of his disappointment. Could a man so focused on avoiding loss truly embrace the unpredictability of life? The second test involved a child who had lost her way in the village. Zola arranged for little Amma, the blacksmith's daughter, to wander near each Joe while appearing distressed. Zola watched closely to see how each man would react. Joe the hunter noticed Amma immediately. He crouched down, his eyes softening. "Are you lost, little one?" he asked. When Amma nodded, he took her small hand and led her back to her family, never asking for thanks. His quiet, protective nature shone through. Zola's heart warmed at his gentle strength, but she still wondered if his stoic nature could offer the emotional depth she craved. Joe the scholar asked Amma many questions. Where did you last see your mother? What path did you take? He guided her back using logic and reasoning. Amma reached her family safely, though she seemed overwhelmed by his questions. Zola admired his intelligence, but she worried that his need for answers might complicate simple moments. Joe the farmer lifted Amma into his arms without hesitation. "Let's get you home," he said, his voice warm and reassuring. He carried her back, talking to her softly about the crops and animals she loved. Zola's heart swelled. His natural kindness and warmth made her feel safe. Yet the question of adventure lingered. Joe the musician was playing his mbira when Amma appeared, her eyes filled with tears. Without missing a beat, he stopped his music and knelt. "Hey, little star," he said softly. "Did you lose your way? Don't worry, we'll find the way home together." He took her hand and hummed a gentle tune as they walked. The song calmed Amma's fears, and soon she was smiling again. When they reached her family, Joe gave a small bow and returned to his music. Zola was touched by his ability to soothe with such gentle grace, but she wondered if his reliance on music could anchor the complexities of real life. Joe the merchant watched Amma wandering and quickly assessed the situation. "Come, child," he said, his voice brisk but kind. "You shouldn't be out here alone." He took her hand and asked where her parents were. With a clear plan in mind, he led her through the village market, efficiently navigating the paths until they found her mother. Zola noticed how Joe solved the problem quickly, but his approach was practical rather than tender. She appreciated his efficiency, yet she longed for a touch of warmth and spontaneity. That evening, Zola sat by the river, her feet dangling in the cool water. The sun dipped low, casting a golden glow on the rippling surface. She thought of each Joe's reaction to the tests. They were all good men, each with virtues and flaws, each offering something different. But who could offer her the life she dreamed of? Her heart felt heavy. She realized that choosing a life partner was not just about who they were, but who she was and who she aspired to be. Mama Noni saw Zola's struggle and decided it was time for a more revealing test. "Zola," she said, "you must see how each Joe handles joy, not just challenges. The way a person celebrates life is as important as how they face adversity." The village was planning a moonlit dance in honor of the harvest. Zola invited each Joe to attend with her, hoping their actions during the dance would reveal more of their hearts. Joe the hunter attended the dance dressed in his finest animal skins, his eyes sharp and observant. He danced with precision, his movements controlled and powerful. When the music slowed, he stepped aside, preferring to watch rather than join in the more joyful, spontaneous dances. Zola admired his strength, but his restraint left her feeling that joy, for him, was something to be guarded. Joe the scholar joined her, talking about the cultural significance of the dance. "Did you know," he said, "that this dance is a tradition that dates back generations?" He explained every detail, his voice filled with enthusiasm, but his feet remained planted firmly on the ground. Zola smiled, enjoying his intellect, but she wished he would let go of his thoughts and simply feel the rhythm. Joe the farmer laughed as he took Zola's hand and led her into the circle of dancers. He spun her around, his joy uncontained, his laughter rich and deep. He didn't care if his steps were perfect, he just danced from his heart. Zola felt light and free, her laughter mingling with his. Her heart swelled with happiness, but she still questioned whether this simple joy was enough to sustain a lifetime. Joe the musician brought his drum and played a rhythm that electrified the dancers. He moved effortlessly, his body flowing with the music. "Dance with me, Zola," he called, pulling her close. They moved together, lost in the melody. Zola's heart raced. His passion was contagious, but she wondered if a life of endless music might drown out other, quieter needs. Joe the merchant arrived late, apologizing for a last-minute deal he had to close. He danced briefly, his eyes scanning the crowd, as if distracted by other opportunities. When he suggested they sit and talk about trade prospects, Zola's heart sank. His mind seemed to be elsewhere. The dance ended, and Zola found herself walking alone under the moonlight. Her heart whispered truths she had tried to ignore. She thought of Joe the farmer's laughter, the warmth in his eyes, and the way he made her feel grounded and free at the same time. Perhaps adventure wasn't always about distant horizons. Perhaps it was about discovering the joy in each day, alongside someone who cherished life's simple moments. The third test involved generosity. Zola decided to observe how each Joe reacted when asked to give something of value to someone in need. She enlisted the help of Nala, an elderly woman in the village who often struggled to make ends meet. Each Joe was approached by Nala, who asked for help in her gentle, unassuming way. Zola watched from a distance, eager to see how each man would respond. Joe the hunter listened carefully as Nala explained her need for firewood. Without a word, he led her to his storehouse and filled her arms with dry logs. "You won't go cold tonight," he said simply. Though his gesture was kind, he did not linger to hear her thanks, returning to his work with quiet efficiency. Zola admired his sense of responsibility, but wondered if his reserved nature might leave her yearning for more connection. Joe the scholar offered Nala a bundle of herbs he had collected. "These will help with your aches and pains," he explained, kneeling beside her to demonstrate how to use them. He spoke at length about the properties of the plants, his passion for knowledge evident. While Zola appreciated his thoughtful nature, she noted that his solution, though meaningful, was not what Nala had originally requested. She questioned whether his intellect sometimes clouded his ability to see simple needs. Joe the farmer immediately brought Nala a basket of fresh produce, placing it in her hands with a warm smile. "The land gives to us, so we must give to others," he said. Nala's face lit up with gratitude, and she left with a spring in her step. Zola's heart softened further toward the farmer. His generosity felt pure and effortless, yet she still wondered if he could meet her longing for adventure. Joe the musician gave Nala a song. He played his ambira and sang a tune that spoke of hope and resilience. "Music can fill the heart when the hands are empty," he said. Nala smiled, her spirits visibly lifted, though she left with no physical aid. Zola was moved by his creativity, but wondered if his reliance on intangible gifts could truly sustain a life together. Joe the merchant gave Nala a bolt of cloth, explaining that she could sell it in the market for more than its worth. "This will bring you not just what you need today, but more for tomorrow," he said with a wink. While Zola appreciated his practical approach, she wondered if his transactional nature could overshadow deeper emotional connections. After the third test, Zola sat under the shade of the Baobab tree, her mind heavy with thoughts. Each Joe had shown their character, their strengths and their flaws. She began to see that while all 5 men were good and honorable in their own ways, only one could truly align with her heart and dreams. She realized she needed one final test, one that would challenge the essence of their relationships with her directly. Zola's final test was one of vulnerability. She decided to share with each Joe a deeply personal story about herself, one that revealed her fears, hopes, and dreams. She wanted to see how each man would respond to her openness. That evening, under the light of the full moon, she began her journey to each man's home, her heart racing with anticipation. When Zola shared her fears of failure and her dreams of exploring life beyond the village, Joe the hunter listened intently. "You're strong," he said. "You don't need to fear. Face your challenges as you would a storm, head on." Though his words were encouraging, Zola felt a distance in his response. She wondered if he could truly embrace her vulnerability, or if he saw her as someone who needed to be tough at all times. Joe the scholar leaned forward as Zola spoke, nodding thoughtfully. "Dreams are the mind's way of charting a path forward," he said. "We can create a plan to help you achieve them step by step." While Zola valued his practicality, she noticed that his response felt more like a lecture than a heartfelt connection. She questioned if he could fully engage with her emotions. Joe the farmer listened quietly, his eyes softening as Zola shared her story. When she finished, he reached for her hand. "Your dreams are beautiful, Zola," he said, "and your fears are natural. Together we can face them, one season at a time." His words were simple but genuine, and Zola felt a warmth she hadn't experienced before. Yet, she wondered if his contentment with a steady life could truly match her yearning for the unknown. Joe the musician responded with a song, his voice carrying her fears and dreams into a melody. "Your heart is a story," he said, "and I want to help you write it." Zola was moved to tears, but she questioned if a life built on creativity alone could sustain the challenges of reality. One afternoon, as the wind whispered through the fields, Zola saw a figure approaching. It was Joe the hunter, his gaze as sharp as ever. He nodded respectfully. "I'm glad you found your path," he said. "A good harvest is worth more than any hunt." Zola thanked him, their shared silence full of understanding. Though paths diverged, respect remained. Joe the musician visited next, his mbira in hand. He played a tune that danced through the fields, making the crops seem to sway with joy. "This song is for your new life," he said. "May the melody of love always play in your heart." Zola listened, grateful for his blessing. Music still had a place in her life, woven gently into her days. Joe the scholar came bearing books on farming and irrigation. "Knowledge nurtures the land as much as rain does," he said, handing Joe the farmer a volume bound in leather. Joe nodded, always eager to learn. "Thank you for helping our fields grow wiser." Zola felt a quiet joy. Each Joe had left a piece of themselves in her life, like seeds planted in rich soil. One day, Joe the merchant arrived with a parcel wrapped in fine cloth. "A gift from distant lands," he said, revealing delicate silver bracelets. "May these remind you that adventure exists even in small moments," he added. Zola wore the bracelets, their jingling a soft reminder that her heart's journey was ongoing, even in the fields of Ilodi. Zola and Joe spent the next months building a new hut on the edge of the farm. Joe crafted strong walls from clay and wood, while Zola decorated the interior with woven mats and painted calabashes. "Our home will be sturdy and beautiful," Zola said, running her hand over the smooth walls. "Like our love," Joe added. One night, a fierce storm shook their new home. Wind howled, and rain lashed the roof. Zola clung to Joe's hand. "We're safe together," he said, his voice calm. His steady presence was a lighthouse in the storm. When dawn came, their home still stood strong, a testament to their love's resilience. To celebrate the end of the harvest, the village held a grand feast. Zola and Joe brought baskets overflowing with produce. The air was filled with the smell of roasting meat and the sound of laughter. Mama Noni hugged Zola tightly. "You found your place, my daughter." Zola smiled, knowing her heart had indeed found its home. The days grew shorter, and the fields lay quiet under a pale sky. Zola and Joe walked hand in hand, the air cool and crisp. "Love is like the seasons," Joe said. "It changes, but it never ends." Zola leaned against him, feeling the truth of his words. The first year of marriage brought joy, but it also brought challenges. A drought settled over Ilodi, and the fields began to wither under the relentless sun. The once fertile soil turned to dust, and worry crept into the hearts of the villagers. Joe and Zola worked tirelessly, carrying water from the river to keep their crops alive. "We must trust the land," Joe said, sweat dripping from his brow. It has given us much before. It will again. Zola nodded, but doubt gnawed at her spirit. Yet, seeing Joe's unwavering faith gave her the strength to keep going. One evening, as the sun sank below the horizon, Zola remembered the books Joe the scholar had given them. She flipped through the pages by the light of a lantern, her eyes widening as she found a section on irrigation techniques. "Joe, look. We can create channels to direct the water more efficiently," she said, excitement in her voice. Joe studied the diagrams and smiled. "You're brilliant, Zola. Let's try it." Together, they built small channels to guide water to the most parched parts of the field. Hope blossomed alongside their crops. Though the drought persisted, the crops survived. When harvest time came, the yield was smaller than usual, but it was enough. The villagers marveled at Joe and Zola's fields, still standing green and proud. "Your hard work saved us," Mama Noni said, pride shining in her eyes. Zola and Joe shared a look of quiet triumph. "We did it together," Zola whispered. As the cool winds of the dry season swept through Ilodi, Zola felt a new stirring within her. One morning, while working in the fields, she paused, a hand resting on her belly. "Joe," she said softly, "I think we're going to have a baby." Joe's eyes widened with joy. He lifted her in his arms, spinning her around as laughter filled the air. "Our family is growing, Zola." Their hearts danced with hope and anticipation. The news of Zola's pregnancy spread through the village like wildfire. Women came to share advice and offer help, while the men congratulated Joe with hearty pats on the back. Mama Noni busied herself preparing herbs and special foods. "You'll need your strength, my daughter," she said. Zola's days were filled with gentle work and quiet joy. She and Joe spoke often of the child who would soon join them. One afternoon, Amina, the village midwife, visited Zola's hut. Joe the merchant smiled as she finished her story. "The world is vast and your dreams are part of it," he said. "I can show you places you've never imagined. Together, we'll build a life filled with adventure." His words excited her, but she wondered if his focus on the future might make him overlook the importance of the present. The sun rose gently over Ilodi village, casting a golden glow over the huts and fields. Zola awoke with a sense of purpose. Today, she would make her decision. Her heart, heavy with doubt, yet alive with hope, felt ready. She dressed in her finest attire, a flowing Keating's dress her mother had gifted her. Mama Noni greeted her daughter with a knowing smile. "The Baobab tree always knows where the roots lie," she said. "Go find your true roots, Zola." Zola took a deep breath and set off to speak to each Joe one last time, hoping to find the clarity she sought. Zola met Joe the hunter at the edge of the forest. The scent of damp earth and the rustling leaves filled the air. They walked in silence, the hunter's sharp eyes scanning the woods. "The world is wild, and we must be strong to survive it," he said, his voice calm. Zola nodded, understanding his dedication to protection and survival. But she realized her heart craved more than strength and silence. She longed for vulnerability, shared joys, and tender moments. As they parted, she whispered, "Thank you, Joe." He nodded, his eyes reflecting quiet understanding. Joe the scholar greeted her beneath the same hilltop sky where they had once mapped the constellations. He spoke of new discoveries, of paths that reason could build. "Knowledge is our guide," he said. "With it, we can solve anything." Zola admired his mind, but she felt an emptiness where emotional connection should bloom. "Thank you for showing me the stars," she said softly. He smiled, oblivious to the distance in her words. Joe the farmer met her by his fields, the sun illuminating his steady, kind face. "Zola," he said, "life is like a harvest. We plant, we nurture, we grow together." His words wrapped around her heart like a warm blanket. She felt a deep affection for him, a haven in his embrace. Yet, As she looked at the familiar fields, she wondered if her spirit would feel caged in the simplicity of a life without adventure. "You're a good man, Joe," she said, her voice trembling. Joe the musician played his mbira under the old acacia tree, his music flowing like water. "Let's create a song together, Zola," he said, his eyes shining. The melody touched her heart, but she wondered if a life of song could weather the storms of reality. His passion stirred her soul, but she knew she needed more than fleeting moments of music. "Thank you for your songs," she said, her eyes glistening with tears. Joe the merchant welcomed her with stories of distant lands and promises of adventure. "The world is waiting for us," he said, his enthusiasm infectious. Her heart fluttered at the thought of exploring the unknown. Yet she sensed his gaze was always fixed on the horizon, never on the present moment. "Thank you for your dreams," she said, feeling a pang of sorrow. As the sun began to set, Zola returned to the ancient Baobab tree. She sat beneath its wide branches, tears tracing paths down her cheeks. Each Joe had shown her something beautiful, yet something was missing. Closing her eyes, she listened to the wind rustling through the leaves. In that quiet moment, a wave of understanding washed over her. Her heart spoke clearly for the first time. Zola's feet led her, unbidden, to the fields. The air smelled of earth and promise. There, standing amidst the golden crops, was Joe the farmer. His eyes, warm and steady, met hers. No words were needed. "I choose you," Zola whispered, her heart bursting with certainty. Joe's smile was like the dawn, gentle, steady, and full of hope. He took her hand, and in that touch, she felt the promise of a life both grounded and full of quiet adventure. The village gathered to celebrate Zola's decision. Music filled the air, children danced, and elders smiled knowingly. Zola and Joe stood together, hands entwined as the sun dipped below the horizon. Mama Noni's voice rose above the crowd. "May your love be as strong as the baobab, as fertile as the fields, and as endless as the sky." Zola knew her journey had led her home. Together, she and Joe would nurture their love, season by season, forever. The first season after their marriage brought the harvest. Zola and Joe worked side by side, the sun on their backs and the scent of ripening maize in the air. Their hands met as they gathered the golden ears, and each touch sent warmth through Zola's heart. "The land has given us much," Joe said, his eyes reflecting gratitude. "But working with you makes the harvest sweeter." Zola smiled, realizing that joy truly lay in sharing life's simplest moments. Her doubts about feeling trapped melted away in the rich soil beneath her feet. "You are strong, and so is your baby," Amina said. "Trust your body, trust your heart." Zola smiled, feeling a wave of calm wash over her. She knew she was ready for this new chapter. That night, Zola dreamed of a vast field of golden maize swaying under a clear sky. In the middle of the field stood a child with bright eyes and a smile that warmed her soul. When she awoke, she whispered to Joe, "Our child will bring us more joy than we can imagine." Joe kissed her forehead. "And we will give them a world full of love." The day finally came. The sun was just rising when Zola felt the first pains of labor. Joe held her hand, his face a mask of calm, though his eyes betrayed his worry. Amina arrived, and the hut filled with the quiet strength of women who knew the rhythms of birth. Hours passed, each one longer than the last. And then, as the afternoon light filtered through the doorway, the cries of a newborn filled the air. Joe took the baby in his arms, tears streaming down his face. "Our child," he whispered. "Welcome to the world." They named her Nia, meaning purpose. Her tiny fingers wrapped around Zola's thumb, and Zola's heart swelled with a love she had never known. The village gathered to celebrate Nia's arrival. Drums echoed through the air, and songs of joy rose to the sky. Mama Noni held her granddaughter, tears of happiness glistening in her eyes. She carries the strength of the Baobab and the love of the fields, she declared. Zola looked at Joe and Nia, knowing their love had grown roots deep into the earth. That night, Joe held Nia close and whispered, "I will protect you, teach you, and love you always." Zola listened, her heart full. Their family was small, but their love was boundless. Nia grew quickly, her laughter filling every corner of their home. One bright morning, as Zola and Joe sat beneath the Baobab tree, Nia pulled herself up on her tiny legs. Her eyes sparkled with determination. "Come on, Nia," Joe encouraged, holding out his hands. Nia took a shaky step, then another, before falling into her father's arms. Zola clapped her hands in delight. "She's walking! Our little girl is walking!" In that moment, the struggles of the past year melted away, replaced by pure joy. The annual harvest festival arrived, and the entire village buzzed with excitement. Zola and Joe decorated their home with woven mats and garlands of flowers. Nia toddled around, trying to help in her own way. During the festival, Joe presented their crops to the elders, who praised their resilience and hard work. "You two remind us of all of the strength that comes from love and unity," Elder and Becky said. Zola's heart swelled with pride. They had faced hardships together and emerged stronger. One afternoon, Zola saw 5 familiar figures approaching. The other Joes had come to visit. Joe the hunter, Joe the scholar, Joe the musician, and Joe the merchant, each brought gifts. Joe the hunter handed Nia a carved wooden lion. "May you be strong and fearless," he said. Joe the scholar gave her a book of village stories. "May knowledge always guide you," he said. Joe the musician played a tune on his mbira. "May your heart always dance," he said. Joe the merchant gave her a silk scarf from a distant land. "May your life be filled with adventure," he said. Joe the farmer, holding Zola's hand, smiled. "And may your roots always keep you grounded." Zola knew that each of these men had shaped her journey. They had all found their own paths, just as she had found hers. As Nia grew, her curiosity bloomed. She followed Joe into the fields, asking questions about the crops, the soil, and the seasons. "Why do plants grow, Papa?" she asked one day, her eyes wide. "Because the earth gives them what they need," Joe said. "Just like we give you love and care." Zola watched them, her heart full. Their daughter was learning the lessons of the land, lessons of patience, care, and respect. One night, dark clouds gathered on the horizon. A storm swept through the village, the wind howling like a wild beast. Joe and Zola hurried to secure the crops, their hands working quickly. Nia clung to Mama Noni inside the hut, her eyes wide with fear. When the storm passed, the damage was evident. Some crops had been flattened, and their roof was partially torn. Zola felt a wave of despair. "We worked so hard," she whispered. Joe took her hand. "We'll rebuild, Zola. We always do." The next day, the villagers came together to help rebuild. The men repaired the roofs, while the women tended to the damaged fields. Even the children pitched in, their laughter bringing light to the hard work. Zola's heart lifted. We're never alone, she realized. Our community is our strength. By sunset, the village stood strong again, a testament to their unity and resilience. One afternoon, Nia met a girl her age named Ayo. They quickly became inseparable, their laughter ringing through the fields as they played. "Friendship is like a seed," Joe told Nia. "You must water it with kindness and care." Nia nodded solemnly, holding Ayo's hand. "I will, Papa." Zola smiled, knowing that her daughter was learning the importance of relationships. During a particularly dry week, food became scarce. Zola and Joe decided to share their remaining produce with the villagers who had less. "We'll get through this together," Joe said. When Nia saw her parents giving away food, she offered her favorite toy to a child who had none. Zola's eyes welled with tears. "You're already wise beyond your years," she whispered. One evening, Joe the musician visited again. As the sun set, he played a gentle tune on his mbira. The melody wove through the fields, blending with the rustling leaves and the distant calls of birds. "The land has its own song," he said. "Listen closely, and you'll hear it." Zola closed her eyes, the music filling her soul. "We are part of this song," she realized, "a note in the symphony of life." The planting season began with renewed hope. The villagers, led by Joe and Zola, gathered in the fields, sowing seeds of maize and beans. Nia watched intently, her small fingers trying to help. "One day, these seeds will grow tall," Joe said, placing a seed in Nia's hand. "Just like you." Nia planted the seed carefully. "Will it grow into a big tree, Papa?" "Not a tree," Zola laughed, "but something just as important, food for our family and our village." Nia nodded solemnly, understanding that small things could grow into something wonderful. As the fields began to sprout, a new life entered the world. Ayo's mother gave birth to a baby boy, and the village buzzed with excitement. Nia and Ayo peered into the small cradle where the baby lay, his tiny fists waving in the air. "He's so small," Nia whispered. "We were that small once," Zola said, smiling. "And just like you, he will grow strong with love and care." The baby's cries mixed with the rustling of the crops, a sign that life continued, even after hardship. Mama Noni spent more time with Nia, teaching her the old ways of the village, how to weave baskets, how to grind maize, and how to listen to the whispers of the wind. "The land speaks to us," Mama Noni said one evening. "We just need to listen." Nia closed her eyes, listening to the breeze. "I hear it, Grandma. It's saying the crops will grow." Mama Noni laughed, her eyes shining. "You have a wise heart, little one." One morning, a stranger arrived in the village. He was a traveler, dusty from the road, his eyes weary but kind. The elders welcomed him, offering food and shelter. "I've been to many places," the traveler said, "but your village feels like home." Zola and Joe listened to his stories of distant lands. Nia sat by his feet, wide-eyed. "Will I see those places one day?" Joe smiled. "Maybe you will, but always remember where your roots are." A sickness spread through the village, leaving many weak and bedridden. Zola, Joe, and the other villagers worked tirelessly, bringing herbs, food, and care to those in need. "We are stronger together," Zola said, holding Joe's hand as they delivered medicine. Slowly, the sickness passed, and the village recovered. The bonds between neighbors grew even stronger, woven through hardship and compassion. Nia noticed one of the village boys, Kofi, sitting alone near the fields. His family had suffered greatly during the illness. "Why are you sad?" Nia asked, sitting beside him. "I miss my papa," Kofi whispered. Nia took his hand. "You can play with me and Ayo. We can be your friends." Kofi's eyes brightened, and for the first time in days, he smiled. Zola watched, her heart swelling with pride at her daughter's kindness. One evening, the villagers gathered around a great fire. Elder Becky began telling stories of the ancestors, tales of bravery, love, and wisdom. "Our stories remind us of who we are," he said. "They guide us through life's journey." Nia sat on Zola's lap, entranced by the flickering flames and the elder's deep voice. She felt connected to the long line of people who had come before her. The dry season was ending, and the first whispers of rain filled the air. Joe and Zola worked quickly to prepare the fields, reinforcing the channels they had built during the last drought. "This time we'll be ready," Joe said, his eyes reflecting determination. Nia helped where she could, carrying small tools and cheering them on. Their family was a team, bound by love and purpose. Finally, the sky opened, and rain poured down on Ilodi. The parched earth drank deeply, and the fields seemed to sigh with relief. Nia danced in the rain, her arms outstretched. It's like the sky is singing, Zola laughed, joining her daughter. Joe watched them, joy radiating from his heart. The land was alive again, and so was their spirit. Joe the hunter returned with a gift for Nia, a necklace made of small, smooth stones. Each stone represents a challenge overcome, he said. Wear it, and remember you are strong. Nia accepted the necklace, her eyes shining. Thank you, Uncle Joe. Zola smiled, grateful for the connections that continued to shape their lives. A merchant passing through the village told stories of a new market in a nearby town. It's a chance to trade and learn, he said. Joe and Zola considered the opportunity. Perhaps it's time to expand our horizons, Zola suggested. We'll go together, Joe agreed, as a family. They packed their best produce and set off early one morning. Nia's excitement was contagious as she pointed at everything they passed, fields, rivers, and small villages. The world is big, she said. Yes, Joe replied, but no matter where we go, home is where our hearts are. As they returned from the market, Zola felt a familiar flutter in her belly. A quiet joy bloomed within her. That evening, as the fire crackled and Nia slept soundly, she took Joe's hand. Joe, she whispered, we're going to have another baby. Joe's eyes widened and his face broke into a radiant smile. He wrapped his arms around Zola, his voice trembling with emotion. Our family grows again. Their hearts swelled with anticipation, knowing another precious life would soon join them. The next morning, Zola and Joe gathered their loved ones under the Baobab tree. Nia sat on Joe's shoulders, her face beaming. Mama has a baby in her belly, Nia announced, clapping her hands. Cheers and laughter erupted. Mama Noni embraced her daughter, her eyes glistening. Blessings upon blessings, she said. This child will bring even more light to our family. The village celebrated with song and dance, their joy echoing under the wide sky. Nia's excitement grew with each passing day. She followed Zola everywhere, touching her belly and talking to the baby. Hello, little one, she whispered. I'm your big sister, and I'll teach you everything I know. Zola's heart overflowed with love as she watched her daughter's eagerness. You'll be a wonderful sister, Nia. Nia nodded solemnly. I'll help Mama and Papa too. The village came together to help Zola and Joe prepare for the new baby. The women wove blankets and sewed tiny clothes. The men built a new cradle, strong and beautiful. Zola's home filled with gifts and laughter. This child will know they are loved, Joe said, his hands smoothing the wood of the cradle. They will be surrounded by family and friends, Zola agreed. As the days grew shorter, Zola felt her energy waning. Her body ached, and some days she struggled to work in the fields. Joe noticed her weariness and gently took her hands. You've done enough, Zola, he said. Rest now. The village and I will take care of the fields. Zola nodded, gratitude in her eyes. Thank you, Joe. She spent her days resting, surrounded by the love and care of her family. One evening, as the stars twinkled like diamonds, Zola and Joe sat outside, their hands entwined. Do you think this baby will love the stars like Nia does? Zola asked softly. Joe smiled. Every child brings their own light into the world. This one will shine in their own way. They sat in comfortable silence, the universe stretching out above them, full of promise. The night was cool when Zola felt the first pains of labor. Joe called for Mama Noni and the midwife, Amina. The hut filled with the quiet strength of women who knew the rhythm of birth. Hours passed, and as dawn broke, the cries of a newborn filled the air. Amina smiled, placing the baby in Zola's arms.
Thank you for reading my African folklore story. Press like, comment on the story, and ring the bell if you like it.